everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Lynn and today I will be making this album. Let me quickly just give you a flip through of it. This is going to be an accordion hinge album. I feel like it's been forever since I've made a mini album, so I wanted to start with the accordion hinge because it's such an easy one to put together. And I'm using some beautiful papers from Graphic 45. This one's called Nature Notebook. And this came in my DT box from Pear Treasures. So if you're curious and you want to pick up this paper pad, pop on over to the Pear Treasures website. I'll leave a link to it in the description box below. And the accordion hinge album, you can definitely, if you don't want to hand cut things as I am going to do for this particular album. I'll also leave a link to the iCrafter mini album, which is also available on the Pear Treasures website. It's smaller in size, but if you prefer die cutting to hand cutting your own pages, then that might be a good option. So I'm going to start with my pages, and I have this cut to 6 inches wide by 8 inches high. That's the folded dimension. So you'll want to start with a piece of cardstock that is 12 inches wide by 8 inches tall, and along that 12-inch length, you want to score it in half at 6 inches. Then I like to reinforce that fold or that score line with some Tyvek that is cut to 7.5 inches long. And one of the ways that I buy my Tyvek is as these wristbands, which are 3/4 wide already, and they come in convenient strips that are 10 inches long. So I just cut that down. I add some 1/4-inch score tape to both ends, and it's great for reinforcing folds or anything that's going to get exercised or weakened in any way, but you want to hold up over time. And that's exactly what's going to happen along this spine. What I'm doing is cutting a slit, and this is new for me. I wasn't exactly sure whether this would work, but it turned out fantastic, so I will definitely be doing this more. I'm using some of my satin ribbon as my binding. So instead of cutting strips of cardstock to do the accordion hinge binding, I'm using ribbon instead, which is easier in some ways, harder in others, and I'll get to that when we get to the part where we actually bind everything together. Right now, I just want to show them cutting these slits to the width of my ribbon, which happens to be 5/8 of an inch wide, and I just arbitrarily kind of chose to start my slits 2 inches from the top and 2 inches from the bottom. That's what happened to look good to my eye for this size of album. And I chose this size album because I wanted to be able to comfortably fit 4x6 photos, because I think it's just easier and more convenient. It's a size that a lot of people are it's easy for them to get photos printed in that size. So I figured that's going to be most convenient, especially since I do plan to give this as a gift. Now, this is going to be a relatively thin album. That makes it just easier to fill for the person getting this, and it doesn't feel as much of a project, you know what I mean, to actually fill it. So I only have cut 3 page bases, and so I'm setting those aside for a moment while I get these strips prepared. These strips are going to be what actually locks your binding, which in my case I'm using ribbon. It's going to lock it in place. And I've actually just used some of the border strip designs that are part of the paper pad design. So you'll find that one of the sheets will actually have an entire sheet of border strips in different widths or heights. And so I've just cut down a few that I thought would coordinate with the pages that I've the pattern papers for the pages, and so I've cut those to 8 inches wide by 3/4 of an inch tall, and I rounded the corners on 2 of those edges, which wasn't exactly necessary to do because This, I usually do that to make it easier to slip through the accordion hinge that you would normally make out of paper. But since the ribbon is so flexible and you can kind of pull it to loosen it and adjust it, it's really easy to slip these little locking strips in. By the way, if you want to see how to make this with paper binding strips, let me link to that video in the upper right hand corner so that if you want to see how I've made this style of hinge in the past but with paper instead of ribbon, then you can pop over and check out that video. But I just thought this would be a fun way to use up some of my ribbon, but also because this doubles as the binding for my album, but also for the closure too, because I'm just gonna leave an extra length of it so that you can tie it on both ends. And so basically what I've done is I've taken my ribbon and I fold it in half, and then I slip it into each of the center of each of those page bases where I have made those slits, and you'll see me do that in a moment again. I'm just gonna cut off another section of ribbon because I did make 2 slits along my spine, so I'll need to kind of add 2 of these binding strips. And what I'm doing here is just putting a little bit of fray check at the ends of these ribbons so that they don't fray. And so that's one of the binding strips completely in place. And nothing is glued down, nothing's anchored down. You could still move everything around at the moment. So it's all still very adjustable right now. But I do like to go ahead and do all of my binding first, and then I'll decorate the pages, because that way, well, to be honest, I just wanted to see whether this would work with ribbon before I went too far. So here you see, I fold that ribbon in half. From the outside of the page base, I feed that folded edge in. And then I'm going to slip my little locking strip right into that loop. And then I'll pull it snug. And so once you pull that nice and snug, then the binding or that locking strip will prevent the ribbon from pulling all the way out. So that's what's keeping these pages locked in. Now, when you feed this in, the reason why I had to pull it out is because you want, this isn't as big of a deal if you're cutting off both ends of your ribbon, but one end of my ribbon is still attached to my spool. And I didn't know exactly how long of a stretch of ribbon I needed. And so I want to keep the end that's free pointed towards the direction that I'm, moving down my pages. And also when you fold this, you want to fold it so that that edge, that free edge, continues to kind of move down towards the other end of pages that haven't been bound yet. Hopefully that makes sense. So because you just want that continuous stretch of ribbon to just weave in and out of each page. And think of it as, if you were to cut a piece of paper and actually fold this like an accordion, you're doing that with the ribbon as well, that accordion fold, but you're doing it, but because the ribbon is nice and flexible, it's very kind of loosey-goosey, so you can still move things, slide things around, and adjust them. So like here, I'm just trying to adjust this so that I have the same length of ribbon as the first binding strip that's on the top. And the challenging thing with using ribbon is that because it is so flexible, not everything does tend to slide around a little bit. So that's a pro and a con. It's easy because now I can sort of just adjust things, but I do need to use a little bit of my low tack tape to kind of tack things down so that I have it at least anchored on one end. That way I can pull this and not lose any of that extra ribbon that I've left at the front, because I need that extra ribbon because I do want to use this as a closure as well. So I need enough ribbon left over to actually tie the album closed with the back portion of ribbon. So now that everything is in place, it doesn't have to be perfect because there's still time to actually adjust everything, but I just want to make sure that I have it even. And then again, I'm just using something, and in this case I use my sewing clips to anchor that down so that I can pull these ribbons. I'm not pulling super tightly, I just want it to be a little bit taut just so that I can trim off these ends and get them as even as I can. So with this in place, what I'm going to do is just tie this in a loose knot so that, again, I just want to temporarily knot this so that I can just start decorating. And the ribbons are a little bit out of my way, but at the same time, they're holding those locking strips in place, and then I can just focus on the decorating of the book now that it's mostly kind of held together now. And so these mat layers I've cut to 5 3/4 wide by 7 3/4 tall, and then there's some other elements that come in the paper pad, like these cut aparts. I've got this small little flip out, which is the flap itself is 4 inches wide by 4.5 inches tall, and along that 4-inch wide width, I just scored a 1/2 inch glue tab so that I can just have this little bit of a fold out, which is great if, let's say, you have a smaller photo, a 3x4 photo. You can add that to the both sides of this, really. But I kind of designed it so that the more pretty dramatic design was on the outside, and if you wanted to add a photo, you would add it to the inside. The other thing that you could do is instead of a photo, that could be a little journal spot where you could maybe just glue on a piece of cardstock or paper that you've done some journaling on. So I thought that would be another way of adding more photo opportunities. But to make this really simple and easy to use for the person who gets this, I've also cut down some photo mats, which are designed to hold 4x6 photos. And I just cut them to 4 3/16 by 6 3/16. I know not everybody likes to use 1/16 of an inch, so you can definitely round that up or round that down to the nearest 1/8 if you want. I just happen to like the look of that much of a border, and so that's what I've gone ahead and done for my photo mats. And what I'll do is, I was contemplating using some of these cardboard stickers, or cardstock stickers, sorry, as tuck spots, but I think instead what I think will be even easier is to put actual photo corners on these photo mats. And so these are already have adhesive on the back, but I don't know how strong that adhesive is. So I'm just putting a little dot of glue to make sure that it has a nice strong hold on these photo mats. And I just used some solid color cardstock from my stash that I thought would coordinate with the pattern paper. And I'll go ahead and just glue that down. I thought about gluing it at a wonky angle, but I decided against it and just tried to center it and attach it as straight as I could, just eyeballing it. And of course, whatever adhesive you do use, be sure to burnish it really well so that your adhesive has a nice firm stick, but also you knock any air out, and you won't get lifting over time. I personally like to put double-sided adhesive, dry adhesive, along all four edges as close to the edge as possible. And that way I have kind of edge-to-edge coverage in terms of just that outside edge, so there won't be lifting on the outside. But then I like to squiggle on some liquid adhesive to really make sure that this is a nice permanent stick as well. So that's just my preference. And for things like the hinges on those fold-outs, I like to use a strong adhesive. So there I used my score tape because I just happen to have a lot of different types of adhesive, because some are better than others for certain uses, and some are more expensive than others. And so I would love to use score tape all the time because that's the strongest, dry adhesive that I have, but it's not that economical for me to do that. And so I do also like buying my double-sided adhesive tape from just kind of, I don't even know what the brand name is. It's just inexpensive, but it actually turns out to be really strong. And so it works out quite nicely, in fact. So now with this piece that I'm attaching here, this is actually cut to roughly 2.5 by 2 5/8. The 2 5/8 edge is what will get attached to between my two ribbon pieces there. And what this will do is it's actually going to lock the locking strip that we cut out, and is keeping the ribbon in place. And so you're not going to be able to slide that piece out because it's been glued to these extra little panels here. And I just die cut this sort of notebook edge, which, by the way, if you do get the iCrafter mini album die set, it does have a die that will cut out that notebook style edge, so it kind of looks like a torn piece of paper that's been torn out of a spiral notebook. And I thought that might be a really nice another opportunity to just add a journaling spot, or a little caption for whatever photos you're going to place on that page. And so I thought that not only is that great for locking in the locking strip to basically make it more or less permanent, it will also have a functional purpose as well as being a place where you can actually do some journaling or photo captioning. And so I've got everything else already cut out and prepared, and once I get all of these pages decorated, you'll see me work on the cover of this towards the end. And I will, I should have mentioned this at the very beginning, but hopefully you will have noticed that I've timestamped this video, so if there is a portion that you are more interested in seeing, you can just skip to that part. So here's me creating the cover. So I like for my cover to actually be a little bit larger than the pages themselves. So I've cut my cover to be 6.25 inches wide folded by 8.5 inches tall. Well, these aren't folded. apologies. It's just a single sheet of paper that's been cut to 6 1/4 by 8 1/2. And I've cut this out several times. So the first black layer is from 110-pound heavyweight cardstock. Then I have my pattern paper cut to that same dimension, so the full 6 1/4 by 8 1/2. And that's just because I didn't want a black border on the cover, the back or the front cover. And so that's totally up to you. If you like that matte look of having a border on your cover, then you can definitely add cut your pattern paper a little bit smaller so that you can still see that black paper. But I wanted mine to go full to the edge. And then I have actually a second piece of black cardstock cut to the exact same size, which is 6 1/4 by 8 by 8 1/2. And once I get this front cover attached, I'm trying to use the grid lines on my cutting mat here to line everything up nice and straight, and also get the pages of the album to be centered on this cover. Here's my second sheet of black cardstock. This is just, I think, 80-pound cardstock. I didn't mention it, but my page bases are also from 80-pound weight cardstock. And this is going to neaten up the inside of my cover so that I have just one full sheet of black cardstock showing. Because on the inside, I do want that black border around the pattern paper. And so for this matte piece, I've cut it to 6 inches wide by 8 1/4 inches tall. So that's obviously totally up to you, just based on how much of the black paper or border you want to see surrounding your pattern papers. But that's basically the binding and attaching the covers. So I'll show you the covers again. Now I did use my score tape all along the outside edges, and I guess I lost a little bit of footage there while I put together my back cover. But what I'll show you here is how I actually deal with the ribbons. So using some of my score tape, I've just tacked it down sort of in the center of my covers, and here I'm just kind of pulling everything a little bit so that it's a little bit more snug. I don't want it super tight because you want enough room there so that when you start to add photos and whatnot, there's a little bit of slack to accommodate sort of any additional thickness that might get introduced. But with that little strip of score tape, I've just tacked down the ribbons, and that way they're not just going to just move around on you, but I will actually glue a decorative panel over top of that area so you actually won't see that strip of glue. Because if you are using a ribbon that's a little bit more sheer, a little bit more transparent, you might actually see just that little bit of double-sided adhesive tape. But since I knew that I was planning on actually covering that with some pattern paper, I actually didn't mind putting down some of that double-sided adhesive, but only where I knew it would get covered. Now, your other option is to, instead of gluing it on top of the first layer of pattern paper, you could also instead just glue it between the black heavyweight cardstock that I used and that first layer of pattern paper, and then you wouldn't see the ribbon at all. But I kind of like the idea of being able to see the continuation of that ribbon from the spine going, clear across the front and the back covers, and then, coming out the other end where you tie it to close the mini album. So I like the look of it, but you could definitely hide it if you didn't want to use the ribbon as a closure, or even if you did, you can hide it from your back and your front cover by sandwiching it in between the black cardstock and the pattern paper. And I just used heavyweight cardstock, but you could use chipboard too if that's what you have. But here you can see I've glued right over top of my ribbon, and I did use Beacon 3-in-1 because it's really similar to Fabri-Tac. So I thought that it would do a good job of holding that ribbon in place. Now it's already tacked down to the cover of the album, but just having that additional Beacon 3-in-1 glue over top of it will definitely keep it nice and secure. Then I added a chipboard element that came in this paper pad, which is a deluxe collector's edition. So it has all of these extra elements like the cardstock stickers and the chipboard embellishments. And the frame has two parts. So that center oval actually has a butterfly image that I just popped out. And I use the same solid color blue cardstock that I use as a matte layer to that sort of yellow pattern paper that I've used. And I have a couple of stamp sets that are just kind of random words, random, script. This, I think, is made to look like a receipt. And I just did some faint, imperfect stamping. And my idea is that I'll actually die cut out some letters and put the initials of the person I'm giving this to so that it's a bit more personalized to them. And the butterfly here is actually, I just fussy cut that from one of the pattern papers. And so it's a nice large size, so I thought it would make for a really nice focal image to add to the cover. And the three little panels are also cut aparts from one of the designs that comes in the paper pad as well. Now, part of my DT package also included these gorgeous paper flowers from Kaiser Craft, and I got one set that's in the sort of that olive green color and a more kind of vintagey white, and then I got a second set of flowers that were smaller, but they were bright white, and I didn't want the bright white. I wanted to actually match it a little bit better color wise to all of the papers, but as well to the larger flowers. And so I just smushed on some ink, as you saw, watered it down, and then just painted very lightly the flowers. And so white flowers are great that way because you can always paint them to color them whatever color you want. So if you have sprays like a distress oxide spray, you could also spray your flowers to change their colors if you'd like. And these are nice because they do have the wire stems on them, so if you want to use them for different floral arrangements and whatnot, you can. But since I want to adhere them flat to my cover, I'm actually snipping off those wire ends with a just like a metal wire cutter. And so that's gonna pretty much complete my album. It's relatively small, but you can still fit quite a few photos in this, which I think helps to make it a little bit more kind of manageable, I suppose, to fill. And so I kind of like having smaller albums like this sometimes, because then you can really use it for something very specific, like a birthday party or an event. So it doesn't always have to be such a big chore to fill it. And so here you can see that binding along the edge, which I love. It almost looks like when you do hand stitched binding, like Coptic stitch binding, where you can kind of see that exposed binding. And so here's another flip through. I tried to pick pattern papers for my locking strips that would coordinate with the pages. And so the front cover, I figure that can sort of be an intro, and then the rest of the pages I have as photo spots. These little flip outs, again, can be additional photo spots, so it'll fit a 3x4 photo. The main pages will fit 4x6 photos, and I did use some of the cardstock stickers just to add some additional embellishments. So you see a little sticker that's on this little notepad sheet here. I've used some stickers which I fussy cut around, so I actually stuck the stickers onto black cardstock and then fussy cut around it, or in the case of the circular one here, I just got a circle die from my stash and die cut around that as well. So that's my album complete. I hope that you enjoyed it, and if you did, please consider liking, commenting, and sharing. And if you'd like to catch future videos as I post them, consider subscribing to my channel and ringing the notification bell. Thanks so much. Until next time, happy crafting and have a fantastic day. Bye.